Welcome to Thursday Bible Study. We're still in the story, which stays true to the NIV translation of the Bible, and we're currently on King Solomon, who is known as the wisest and richest king there ever was. He's also David's son from David and Bathsheba. If you're just joining us, feel free to look at our previous video to kind of see what we've read so far. I go over a brief overall summary in the last video. But today we're just going to pick up where we left off, chapter 14, and it's called A Kingdom Torn in Two. Because Solomon had not obeyed God and had stopped worshiping him, God planned to divide the kingdom in half. When Solomon died, his son, I'm going to butcher this, Rehoboam became king of a small part of his father's kingdom. The large part was ruled by Jeroboam. The country...
Can you say it different every time you read it?
Probably will. Rehoboam ruled was called Judah, and the kingdom Jeroboam ruled was called Israel. For the most part, the kings and people of Israel and Judah were very sinful. The people of Judah did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. The sins they had committed stirred up his jealous anger. They did more to make him angry than their people who lived before them had done. Judah also set up for themselves high places for worship. They set up sacred stones. They set up poles that were used to worship the goddess Asherah. They did it on every high hill and under every green tree. When the people of Judah and Israel were sinful and didn't obey God, God would show them he was more powerful than their false idols. God used evil kings from other countries, like Shishak and Abijah, to teach his people a lesson and make them come back to him. Shishak carried away the treasures of the Lord's temple. He also carried the treasures of the royal palace away. He took everything. That included all of the gold shields Solomon had made. So the king Rehoboam made bronze shields to take their place. He gave them to the commanders of the guards who were on duty at the entrance to the royal palace. Every time the king went to the Lord's temple, the guards carried the shields. Later, they took them back to the room where they were kept. In addition to a pharaoh attacking Judah, Jeroboam and Rehoboam fought against each other. And when Rehoboam and Jeroboam died, their evil sons took over the kingdoms and continued to fight. For the most part, Israel was very sinful. No matter who was king, the people kept sinning and worshiping idols, which made God angrier and angrier. But there was still hope for Judah. Occasionally a king came to the throne who loved God and who tried to be a good king, like David. Asa, or maybe Ase, was one of these good kings. Asa did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. That's what King David had done. He got rid of all the statues of gods his people before him had made. He even removed his grandmother, Maacah, from her position as queen mother. That's because she had made a pole that she used to worship the goddess Asherah. The Lord hated it, so Asa cut it down. He burned it in the Kidron Valley. Asa didn't remove the high places from Israel, but he committed his whole life completely to the Lord. He and his father had set apart silver, gold, and other articles to the Lord. He brought them into the Lord's temple. There was war between Asa and Baasha, the king of Israel. It lasted the whole time they were kings. Baasha was king of Israel. He marched out against Judah. He built up the walls of Ramah. He did it to keep people from leaving or entering the territory of Asa, the king of Judah. Then King Asa gave an order to all the men of Judah. Everyone was required to help. They carried away from Ramah the stones and wood Baasha had been using there. King Asa used them to build up Jeba in a territory Benjamin. He also used them to build up Mizpah. All of the other events of Asa's rule are written down. Everything he accomplished is written down. Everything he did and the cities he built are written down. They are written in the official records of the kings of Judah. But when Asa became old, his feet began to give him trouble. He joined the members of his family who had already died. His body was buried in his family tomb. It was in the city of King David, Asa's son, Jehoshaphat became the next king after him. Asa and Jehoshaphat were good kings of Judah, but the kings of Israel were wicked. Several kings ruled in Israel after Baasha left the throne. Then the most evil, sinful, and idol-worshipping king came to the throne in Israel. His name was Ahab, maybe? Ahab, the son of Omri, did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. He did more evil things than any king could rule before him. He thought it was only a small thing to commit the sins Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, had committed. Ahab also got married to Jezebel. Ahab began to serve the god Baal and worship him. He set up an altar to honor Baal. He set it up in the temple of Baal that he built in Samaria. Ahab also made a pole that was used to worship the goddess Asherah. He made the Lord very angry. He did more to make him angry than all the kings of Israel had done before him.
Well, that was an era of some interesting names.
Dude, it's hard to pronounce these names because I don't know the original language and culture well enough to know how they may have pronounced it. See, like being in Arizona, if I see a Spanish name, I usually know the difference in pronunciations and the spelling, you know? But with this, I don't have as much knowledge. I don't have a lot to go into deeper details about this book, besides the fact to say that there was just many kings. I couldn't tell you exactly how many generations, but I feel like it goes over at least 10 generations from David onward in the book of Kings, and at least 8 out of 10 were corrupt. They just kept worshiping idols, and even the ones that didn't specifically say did that were just about selfish gain and ambition and had no desire to serve the Lord. Another interesting thing is it says, are not the things Asa accomplished written down? Everything he did is in the record of the kings of Judah. Well, that book's referenced after every king, especially every good king. But the funny thing is we've never discovered that book. We have it documented that it existed, but have been unable to locate it or find it. So that's interesting to know that book doesn't exist. Definitely wasn't kept as sacred and as well as the books of the Bible, but it was really just decrees. We had talked about how decrees are, if you were joining us in the talk about Esther, the king in that time, is read back, what's happened in his life. And it's pretty much, I picture, being the same thing, where they write down large accomplishments of the king, things they found to be of historical significance, which is usually really based off the king more so than anything. So I can't picture it being overly important, but it'd still be very, very interesting to read. But that's it. There was a divide in the kingdom. There was a lot of terrible kings, and sin and idol worship just kept being more and more prominent, and God grew more and more angry with the people. And as we read further, we'll see how God deals with that. But it kind of goes with the old saying. This chapter is titled "A Kingdom Torn in Two," and it's the old saying, "A divided kingdom cannot stand," right? And that's exactly what God's people are right now. They're divided. There's no unity. In fact, there's just a lot of civil war going on, fighting with each other. But that won't last long, because eventually they're going to have other enemies that will end up uniting them. But I just don't think it's right to quarrel amongst ourselves, and I think that's the real lesson in this book, especially with family. I feel like you have to do what it takes to mend that relationship. And I have a family member that I have to keep a distant relationship with that I've talked about, where I feel like written communication is the only safe way to communicate with this person, but I'm never going to write anybody in my family off. Despite what they do, I'm always going to try to pour into them, to be a light so that they can see God and hopefully come to know Him. Because I never want to give up on anybody, especially family. And more so than that, just civil conflict in the United States. I feel like we're constantly divided by politics, by gender, by race, and even by religion. As much as I would love for the whole country to unite behind Christ, I don't want people who aren't Christians to be put down either. I want us as Christians to show those people love and kindness, to stand up against sin, to help to construct laws against sin and sinful behaviors, but for the straight act of belief, God gave us free will. That was His gift to us. So to force somebody into anything isn't the right way, but to show them love and the light is. And so I don't want any conflict and civil conflict in our country. I would love if we could just stop seeing things and being against each other, whether it's the people against the police, and again, men against women, equal rights movements, race and politics. It all does so much to divide us, and sometimes I feel like that's exactly what the world wants, is just to keep us divided, and it's what the enemy wants for certain. I was thinking like the government, but it's definitely what the enemy wants. He wants to keep us divided, and he wants to keep us focused. C.S. Lewis wrote a great book on this called, I think it's called The Screw Tape Letters. I believe that's what it's called. And I read the book a long time ago. It's basically about a demon who's trying to keep this man focused on politics, on furthering his career and making money, and it encourages him to see the flaws in his wife, the flaws in his life and with people. And so the demon's whole agenda is to keep him focused on the problems in the world and on the differences he has with people, instead of letting him focus on what unites him with people and on love. So the whole demon's agenda is to keep him not united and not living out with love, not having meaningful relationships, but to be focused on politics, power, money, and lust. And it works so well. This guy goes to church still because it was very common back then for the majority of people to go to church, but he felt nothing. He didn't participate. He found it a burden to attend church. He was more focused on those things. And I think the enemy has gotten even better at what he does, and it's become an even bigger issue where I feel like we're even more focused on those things than we even used to be. So he's definitely winning the battle. But not to spoil the ending for you guys, but he doesn't win the war. And he knows that, and he can do everything he wants to bring people down with him, but he's going to lose the war. And our goal as Christians is to do everything we can to win the battles every day to prevent him from taking people down below with him. And our goal is to lift people up. So let's remember to unite behind what we have in common, and to lead with love, and to stand firm in our faith against sin, but to always lead with love. And focus on what we have in common. That's what we want to do. So don't let those things divide us. Don't let the enemy win. And that's the real story behind the book, is don't fight with each other. That's what I gained from these kings. Love God, stand firm in your faith, don't worship false idols, money, greed, politics, power. Worship the one and only true and living God, and be united. Stand together. That's my takeaway from that. So thank you as always for joining us for Bible study. And it was a little shorter today. Really excited for chapter 14. God's messenger. We can talk about Elijah, a person I really love, and I have a lot of things to share with you guys about that. And if you struggle with depression or anything, of that nature, I know there's a lot of illnesses surrounding depression, I think it's a really good story for you. It's a story of overcoming, it's a story of inspiration, and somebody who himself struggled in some of those areas. So join us next week on the couch for Bible study as we get more into the story that God had wrote for us as one continuous novel. See you guys next week.